My wife decided to change our lifestyle without my input. The cell door opened and I looked up to see a Hispanic male being led into the cell. The cell door slammed shut behind him and he sat down on a bench against the opposite wall. We looked at each other for a while and then he said, "Hey kid, what are you in jail for?" "For beating the Vici out of a cop. What about you?" "Paying back child support. Did you trample a cop?" "I'm afraid so." "Wow, man, that's a tough case. Why aren't you covered in bruises and bruises? Cops don't like it when one of them gets attacked by a civilian. How come the guys who brought you in didn't process you and claim you resisted arrest?" Good question, I thought, sitting back and going over in my mind the events that had led to my being in the cell. Wendy and I had been married for a little over 10 years. Our marriage was a romance out of a book, a blind date that led to love at first sight, and from that moment on we were never far apart. We were married 4 months after we met, and for the next 10 years, life was perfect, at least in my mind. We couldn't have children because I was infertile, the result of some childhood disease or something, but Wendy didn't care. She said she'd probably be a bad mother anyway. We had a great love life for a couple married 10 years, 3 or 4 times a week, and we did it all. One day we were in a restaurant where the tables had long tablecloths that reached the floor, and Wendy said, "Is no one looking this way?" I looked around, saw that no one was paying attention to us, and said, "No, why?" She giggled, got under the table, and did me good while the waiter asked if we wanted dessert. Wendy and I had the perfect partnership. We discussed everything and never made a decision unless we both agreed. We always seemed to be on the same page. Was I happy with my life? Very definitely yes. Things started to change about 4 months after our 10th wedding anniversary, although I didn't realize it at the time. I got off work early and picked up Wendy when she got off work. Her car was at the shop for brake repair, and as we were driving home, she said, "You'll never guess what happened today." "I guess you're right, so why don't you just tell me?" "Marcia Crowley called me today. She was my best friend from the beginning of middle school all the way through her senior year, until her parents moved. She's back in town. I invited her over for dinner on Friday." Friday came and I met Marcia. She was a very pretty woman, intelligent and with a good sense of humor. She and Wendy got into a conversation about old classmates and what had happened to them, and I quietly withdrew, leaving them to reminisce. They talked to each other on the phone every day after that. The following Tuesday, Wendy told me she was going to meet Marcia after work, and they were going out for drinks with some of the other girls they went to school with. She got home around 11, climbed into bed with me, woke me up, and then we made love, after which we went back to sleep. The next morning at breakfast, Wendy told me that she really enjoyed it, and the girls wanted it to become a weekly thing. Wendy told me that from now on Tuesday would be girls' night. This made me a little upset, but not because I was against the idea, but because she hadn't even discussed it with me. In the past, we always discussed everything before making a decision, but this time she unilaterally decided to change our lifestyle without my input. Every Tuesday for the next 2 months, Wendy went out with her friends. At first, she would get home around 10 or 11, but then it started happening at 11:30, 12, and then at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And Wendy began to change. The change was so gradual that I didn't even notice it right away. She became a little more assertive. That's the best way I can describe it. There was no more, "Would you like to," and much more, "I'm going to." We were no longer partners and definitely not on the same page. I started getting calls from Wendy at work, letting me know that she was meeting Marcia after work for drinks and that I shouldn't wait. She started treating me like I was a piece of furniture in the house, a necessary evil that she had to put up with. The only thing that didn't change was our love life. It still kept at 3 or 4 times a week, but went from 1 or 2 times to 3, and sometimes more. I walked around confused and wondering what had happened to my perfect life, and one evening Wendy told me exactly what had happened to her. It was Friday night. We were having dinner at our favorite steakhouse, and Wendy told me about some of the things the girls had talked about on their night out. She said the girls were amazed that she wasn't more influential, that she wasn't more assertive. The more they talked, the more she realized they were right, and she was putting into practice some of the things they had told her. One of the things they convinced her of was that she needed to take responsibility for her sex life. When she said that I might not understand or want to accept that, they told her that she should tell me that she was on her own and that I would just have to accept it. Then she said, "I've decided to have a lover. I got a little tired of one-night stands and parking lot romances. I decided I needed something more permanent and reliable." One-night stands? Parking lot romances? You wonder. Of course you know what I've been doing in the evenings. No, Wendy. I'm afraid you don't. Come on, Rob. You don't expect me to believe that you didn't know you were getting sloppy seconds, do you? I'm afraid I had no idea, Wendy. I guess I foolishly thought you were a loving and faithful wife. What makes you think that? I am a loving wife, honey. I truly love you with all my heart and fully expect to grow old in your arms. My extracurricular sex life in no way diminishes my love and affection for you. I am simply expanding my love horizons. I'm telling you this now so you can participate if you want to. That's a joke, isn't it? Are you turning me on? Marcia told me that's how you're likely to react. The important thing, she told me, is to make sure you understand that me having a lover won't jeopardize our relationship or my love for you one bit. I just need to help you realize that my freedom will benefit our marriage by allowing me to try new things and be more responsive to whatever you want to try. Do you really believe this nonsense you're spouting? That I'm going to sit back and say, "Have a nice time, darling," when you get a lover? Don't you know me better than that? Is your opinion of me so low that you think I'll accept the role of your cuckold? Now you're lucky I choose to believe you're joking about what you said today. I don't believe what you said about one-night stands, because I believe that if you were really doing it, I would have noticed something. I think you threw it all out there to shake me up and try to soften me up to this lover nonsense. Our marriage is big enough for you and me. There's no room in it for anyone else. Thanks for ruining my evening. I think we'll skip the drinking and dancing and go home. I'm sorry you feel that way. Please remember that I asked you to be a part of this evening. No, Wendy. You remember that I said there is no room in our marriage for anyone else. The ride home passed in silence as I tried to digest what Wendy had dumped on me that evening. Marcia and her friends had obviously been filling Wendy's head with all sorts of stupid and idiotic garbage. What I couldn't understand was Wendy's attitude toward me. How could she believe that I would go along with her nonsense? What really bothered me was that she was telling me she'd had one-night stands and, as she put it, affairs in the parking lot. If I really believed that, our marriage would be over. I had to believe she was just saying that to find out from me if I would be open to whatever she wanted to do. I know she would. It's called denial. But my choices were limited. I loved her, but if I believed what she told me was true, we would break up. My only choice was to believe she was just testing me and hope to God that I would never find out otherwise. Wendy tried to have sex when we got home and got into bed. She came to bed naked, which was one of the signals she used when she was in the mood to make love. But for the first time in our married life, I said, "Not tonight, Wendy. I really don't feel like it." She threw me a look that said, "You're being childish," and then turned and went into the bathroom, where she came out a few minutes later in her nightgown. She climbed into bed, rolled over onto her right side, and pressed her back against me, and a few minutes later I heard the steady breathing of a sleeping person. I didn't sleep well that night. Over the weekend, I had projects that kept me out of the house and away from Wendy. On Saturday, when I walked into the house, she already had dinner on the table, and we ate in silence. After eating, I went back to the garage and got busy with my car. When I came to go to bed, Wendy was already in bed and asleep. Several times on Sunday, I almost approached her to talk more, but each time I backed off because I was afraid that what I might say would make things worse. Sunday night was a bad night. I was having a bad day and not much was going right. It seemed like everything I did was getting in my way, and towards the end of the day I hit my thumb with a hammer. It hurt a lot, and I was in an irritable mood when I went into the bedroom in the evening. Wendy said, "Don't you want to have some fun tonight?" I snapped back, "What's the point? You've been home all day, so there's no way you can give me sloppy seconds, and that takes all the fun out of it, right?" I regretted it as soon as I said it, and almost told her I was sorry, but then I thought, bullshit. I didn't start this. When I came out of the bathroom, she was in bed facing the wall and her back to me. Monday morning, I got up early and was out of the house before Wendy even got out of bed. Fortunately, I was very busy at work that day, and I didn't have time to reflect on my predicament that Wendy was in. When I got home, Wendy was already waiting for me with dinner, and we ate in silence. As I cleared the table to help Wendy with the dishes, I said, "I've been thinking, Wendy, and I don't think you should have a girls' night out anytime soon." She had her back to me and her hands were in the sink, so I couldn't see the expression on her face when she said, "Marcia said you'd do it. Try to strangle me." "I think you listen too much of what Marcia says, and that's why I think you shouldn't see her anymore." "I'm a grown woman, Rob, and I'm perfectly capable of choosing my own friends. I'm sorry that having me run my own life upsets you, but Marcia and the other girls were right. I was letting you run my life. All they did was remind me that it was my life, and that I should be in charge of it." "What, I was controlling you?" "You never let me do anything without putting in your 2 cents. Whatever we did, we had to discuss it, and then we both had to agree before we did it. If I did something on my own, you sulked, because you weren't involved in the decision. I can't even count how many times I wanted to do something but didn't, because you overruled it during our so-called discussions. Basically, if you didn't agree, nothing happened. Marcia and the girls opened my eyes, and I'm going to be myself from now on, and I don't know why that makes you feel threatened. We love each other, and we have a strong marriage. It's going to be okay, Rob." "I'm asking you not to go out with your girlfriends tomorrow." "And I'm telling you I'll go." The bedroom was chilly again, and I was up and out before Wendy even got out of bed. I stopped at the Waffle House for breakfast, and when I finished eating, I called work and told them I was taking the day off. I spent the day doing some things that I felt were necessary and then came home and took care of business. I moved all my stuff from the bedroom to the guest bedroom. I was in bed when Wendy came home at midnight. About 10 minutes after she arrived, I heard her trying the knob of the guest room door. When she found it locked, she knocked on the door. "Rob? Let me in, Rob." I just lay there and kept quiet. "Come on, Rob. This is so unnecessary. Please, Rob, open the door." I ignored her, and a few minutes later she was back in her bedroom. I was out of the house again before Wendy was even out of bed, and about mid-morning I called the lawyer to make an appointment. I stopped denying and accepted that Wendy had done what she said she did. I felt really ashamed because I really loved Wendy, but I couldn't live with the woman she had turned into. I had no idea what strange influence Marcia and the other girls had on Wendy, but it was obvious that Wendy was more interested in what they said than what I said. The woman I married would never look me in the eye and tell me she was going to have a lover. The woman I married would never casually mention a one-night stand or having sex in parking lots. And the woman I married would never, ever expect me to go along with that. We may have still had some tiny hope if she had given up her one-night stand with Marcia and the other women in their group and stayed home so we could work on the gap she'd opened between us, but her adamant, "And I'm telling you I'm leaving," put an end to that. That evening when I got home, Wendy was waiting for me in a sexy black lace nightgown and high heels. Dinner was on the table, wine poured, temptation swept over me. Looking at her, I was definitely tempted, but I looked at her and said, "Nah, what's the matter? Didn't you get enough in the parking lot yesterday?" She looked at me like I had just slapped her in the face with my bare hand and then said, "Please, Rob, I love you and you know I love you. Why can't you accept that I'm yours and you won't lose me for being a little nosy? I don't accept that, Wendy, because you're not mine. When you gave yourself over to your first one-night stand, you stopped being mine and became someone else's. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip. Nice wine and a very nice outfit, but I'm going to need at least 6 bottles of this wine to get myself to the point where I want anything to do with your unfaithful ass. I set the wine glass aside and headed for the spare bedroom. We need to talk this out, Rob. Hiding in the spare bedroom isn't going to solve anything. I'm not trying to solve anything by staying in the spare bedroom. All I'm trying to do is stay away from you. As far as talking, we've already done that. I asked you to stay away from Marcia and the other girls who are filling your head with all the bullshit you're talking about, and you basically told me to fuck off. You chose them and their garbage over me, and all I can say is that I hope you're happy with your choice. I walked away, leaving her standing still. I spent the next 2 days trying my best to avoid Wendy while I looked for an apartment and talked to a lawyer. It turned out that we lived in a no-fault state, so barring any complications, everything would mean the property would be divided 50-50. We had no children, so child support was not an issue, and Wendy made as much as I did, so there would be no alimony. I told the man to get the papers ready and use irreconcilable differences as the basis. On Friday, around 3:00 in the afternoon, Wendy called me at work. The conversation boiled down to the following. Since you don't want to work with me on this, I would suggest that you don't come home until 11 o'clock today. As I hung up the phone, I shook my head at the change in Wendy. I found it hard to believe that she could believe that I would tolerate what she was doing and that our life together would continue as it was. Nothing I said seemed to make the proper impression on her. So I decided that since everything I said went in one ear and out the other, I needed to get my point across to her in a way that she could understand. The smart thing to do was to walk away. I had already set the divorce process in motion, and I should have just let it go. But I couldn't. From what she'd told me on the phone, she was going to bring a man into my house and onto my bed while I was supposed to be away somewhere with something to occupy myself until she was done with him. No way. After coming home from work, I stopped by Riley's Tavern for a couple drinks and then headed across the street to the Village Inn and had dinner. At 7:30, I was at the house looking at a strange car in my driveway. I looked at that car and thought, the asshole who drives it is in my house, having sex with my wife on my bed. He knows she's married, and he doesn't care. As I walked into the house, I could hear them. And the higher I went up the steps to the second floor, the more I heard, and the more I heard, the more angry I got. When I entered the room, the guy saw me and jumped off the bed and headed for his clothes, which were on a chair. I reached for him and tripped him. He fell over, knocking over the chair and his stuff sprinkled on the floor. In his belongings, I saw a revolver in a shoulder holster and saw him reach for the weapon. I kicked him in the head and then started working on him with my legs. By then, Wendy realized what was happening and started yelling for me to stop. You're hurting him, Rob. Stop it now. I kept kicking the asshole, on his head, on his ribs, on his balls. I just kept kicking. Wendy tried to pull me away from the guy, but I rolled her onto her back and she fell back onto the bed. You're killing him, Rob! Stop it! She yelled. I turned around and growled at her. Would you rather he killed me? He has a gun and he was going to get it. Of course he has a gun. He's a cop. You stupid fool! I growled at her and turned around to kick the asshole in the balls one more time. I noticed the blood dripping from his mouth and turned to Wendy again. You better call 911. Your guy doesn't look good. I walked over and picked up this lover's gun and carried it downstairs. I wasn't going to risk the asshole having the strength to get up and come looking for me with his gun. I may have been angry and furious when I walked into the bedroom, but I'd vented all my rage on this lover, and I had a clear enough mind to know what to do. Before the paramedics and cops got to the house, I called my lawyer, telling him what had happened and that I was expecting to be arrested. I made arrangements with him to get me out on bail and gave him information I thought he might need. Apparently, this polycop was not well liked, at least not enough for his buddies to want to work me over. The lawyer got me out of jail and then got all the charges dropped when the surveillance footage I had installed on Tuesday when I excused myself from work showed the asshole going for his gun. I acted in self-defense, my lawyer argued, and he managed to sell it. Loverboy was demoted from detective to patrolman and suspended for 60 days without pay. Wendy showed up at the jail to bail me out, but when she arrived, I was already out. She called me at work and told me I was acting like a caveman, and Marcia told her that was exactly what I should have expected. That was totally inappropriate, Rob. Do you know Stan's in the hospital with 3 broken ribs? That's what he got for having sex with another man's woman. See, Rob? Even you realize that. I'm your woman, and nothing is going to change that. Something has already changed, Wendy. Seeing that asshole in our bed made a difference. You now have what Marcia and your other friends said you should have. Complete freedom to do whatever you want with your life. I hung up before she could ask what I meant. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.